This video is sponsored by ExpressVPN, and I'll tell you all about them a little bit later on, but for now let's turn our attention to Bird Box. And let me tell you, I have never had a more requested video. Originally written by Josh Malerman and later directed by Susanne Bier, Bird Box quickly became the best thing since sliced bread. The premise of Bird Box is essentially the same as A Quiet Place, except it's worse in every single way. Mysterious creatures suddenly appear all over the world, and if you look at them, you commit suicide. Bier decided that the creatures would be scarier if you were never able to see them, and I think we can all agree that windy leaves are much scarier than a huge grotesque monster. After much panic and bad decision making, the main character Mallory, her child Boy, and the daughter of this lady do a flip! Make it to a remote community in the forest which used to be a school for the blind. It appears that Mallory and the two children will live there happily ever after. Normally, this would be the part of the video where I say that I have a much better idea than the protagonists and that they could have beaten the situation a lot easier if they just did X, Y, or Z. The problem is, there is no way to beat this situation. And when I say that, I don't mean that the ending shown in Bird Box is the only solution. I'm saying that there is no solution. Mallory and everyone else at the end of the film are not going to survive. The situation in Bird Box is entirely unwinnable for the protagonists. So instead what we're going to do is we're going to look at every possible solution for Bird Box, including the school at the end of the film, and I'm going to break down exactly why every single one of those doesn't work. But before I can do that, we need to explicitly lay out the conditions of the scenario, as well as outline the creatures themselves and what makes them so incredibly hard to beat. That way, everyone will be on the same page and we can move forward to talk about the solutions, or lack thereof. We'll start off with what is strangely the most difficult part of the film to explain, the location. Location is important because where the scenario takes place determines what resources are available and what threats our main characters are going to face. A remote location would mean you're less likely to encounter people because there's less population density, but it would also mean less obtainable resources such as canned goods, bottled water, ammunition, and so forth. The film only mentions where Mallory is just once.
Where are you?
Don't answer that.
Near Pike's Quarry.
Pike's Quarry, unfortunately, is a fictional town. However, a series of conversations Mallory has with her sister near the start of the film does give us some hints as to where Pike's Quarry is located. Her sister is hoping to check out a horse near Sausalito.
So at 3 o'clock, I'm gonna go check out an Arabian stud in Sausalito.
Oh, see, now that is a sentence you don't hear every day.
Sausalito is a city just north of San Francisco. An hour or two after this scene, the sister gets a call from the foreman she was supposed to meet there.
My phone is in the back seat. It's probably the foreman wondering where I am.
Just hold your horses.
Yeah.
We can therefore infer that Pike's Quarry is at most several hours away from Sausalito. Mallory's sister mentions that she lives in Santa Rosa and stopped at Mallory's on the way to Sausalito, so Mallory must also live somewhere in this area. Throughout the rest of the film, characters mention Sacramento, Stockton, and Highway 99 as nearby destinations. Based on this information, Pike's Quarry must lie somewhere in this general area in California. But the movie is determined to make this problem even more complicated because the river scene in Bird Box was shot on the Smith River, which is located almost 7 hours away in Northern California. The river in the movie is also called Smith River, and if we compare the map of Pike's Quarry to the map of the real Smith River, we can see that with the exception of the fictional town, the map of the river in the movie is identical to the real river. We can also see Fields Market labeled in this shot, so the entire film has in fact taken place in Pike's Quarry. Even though Pike's Quarry is on the Smith River, which is located very, very far away and contradicts the rest of the information that the film has given us. So how do we reconcile this? My proposal is that Pike's Quarry does lie somewhere northeast of San Francisco, but so too does the river. The Janet Tucker School for the Blind, which is also a fictional place, is somewhere near the end of the Smith River.
We have a community. It's safe here. We're down out of River's End.
If the Janet Tucker School for the Blind is located at River's End, and that river ends just north of San Francisco, then the school must only be a few minutes away from the Pacific Coast Highway. The school then isn't exactly off the beaten path. because it's just north of one of the most populous regions in the country, and it's also right next to a highway. It would be reasonable to conclude that someone using that highway might accidentally discover the school. In terms of prep time, Mallory first hears about the coming danger only an hour or two before the creatures overrun the city, so she had almost no time to respond to the situation before she was thrust into it. The situation that the film presents then is that Mallory is in one of the most densely populated regions of the country, with almost no time to prepare before the creatures descend on the city. Now let's talk about the actual creatures and what makes them such a formidable threat. As previously stated, if you look at one of the creatures, it makes you kill yourself. The film implies that the creatures give you visual hallucinations and show you something so terrible that you have no choice but to take your own life. For example, this woman sees her mother right before she commits suicide, even though her mother has been dead for 10 years. The creatures can also create auditory hallucinations in an attempt to disorient you and make you take your blindfold off.
Mallory, look at me. Mallory, look at me.
Birds are able to sense the creature's presence and freak out whenever they're nearby, but they do nothing to actually deter or repel them. The film takes place over 5 years, and there appears to be just as many creatures at the start of the film as there are near the end, so assumedly the creatures either don't need to eat or at least none of them have starved by this point. The most contentious aspect of the creatures is what their physical dimensions are. When Gary betrays everyone in the house and tears off the window covers, Olympia is the first to see a creature and subsequently jumps out a window, in a scene that probably isn't supposed to be funny. Olympia is on the 2nd floor of the building and is even laying down at the time, which means that if she were to see a creature from this angle, it would need to be at least 2 stories tall. You can see their enormous stature again in this shot as entire trees get thrown out of the way as the creatures run past. Their size may explain why they never enter any buildings, because they probably couldn't fit through the door. But despite their size, would it be possible to reach out and touch one? Probably not. Well, they're certainly capable of manipulating the world around them. We see them bounce the car around when Mallory and friends go to Fields Market, and again you see them moving trees out of the way in this shot. But at no point in the film do they ever physically touch anyone. In this shot, it seems as though one actually walks through the little girl. And just a little while earlier, Mallory shoots one at point-blank range to no effect whatsoever. One creature seems to appear on the spot as though it's been summoned rather than having walked there. All of this leads me to believe that the creatures are more like ghosts or poltergeists. They can manipulate the world around them, but they don't occupy any physical space. An earlier scene in the movie gives more credence to this theory.
They go by different names, right? You got world religion and mythology that's full of mentions of demons or spirit creatures.
Combined, this is still pretty shaky evidence, however, so if you personally contend that the creatures are physically real and walking around, I won't argue with you. One thing we can all agree on is that whether or not they physically exist, they don't seem interested in touching people. Yes, they chase people, and they certainly act threatening, but at no point do they ever attack anyone or attempt to remove anyone's blindfold. They only try to convince the person to do so themselves through auditory hallucinations. Therefore, on their own, the creatures aren't actually a threat to anyone as long as you don't look at them. At worst, they can disorient you by making you hear things that aren't there. So then what makes them so incredibly hard to beat? I'll tell you all about it after this message from our sponsor, ExpressVPN. If you don't already know, a virtual private network is a tool you can use to hide your IP address and internet activity from those who would like to steal your sensitive data, such as your credit card information. But with the use of ExpressVPN, your online identity and internet traffic are encrypted and totally anonymous. Here's 3 reasons why I personally like using ExpressVPN. Number 1, every single server has peer-to-peer network compatibility. Number 2, as a Canadian, I can't access some of the premier content offered on streaming services such as Netflix, which are available only to American users. But with ExpressVPN, I just need to connect to an American server, and these services then recognize me as an American. Lastly, and most importantly, ExpressVPN is flippin' quick, boy! Other VPNs I've used are so slow that I would only use them when I really needed to. But with ExpressVPN, the speed difference is so negligible that I just leave it on all the time. ExpressVPN is less than $7 a month with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Take back your internet privacy today and find out how you can get an extra 3 months for free by clicking the link in the description box. expressvpn.com/filmherald. Take back your privacy with ExpressVPN. So what makes these creatures so unbeatable? The real problem that the protagonists must contend with is not the creatures themselves, but the crazy people determined to remove the blindfolds of anyone they come across. These people, having seen the creatures, do not commit suicide, but instead search out those who haven't looked yet in an attempt to make them see.
They wanted to see. They were happy. And they said everyone needed to see.
In that sense, they're kind of like Mormons, except they're spreading the gospel of horrifying suicide monsters.
Hello, my name is Elder Price, and I would like to share with you
a cleansed world made from fire and death to make way for our demon overlords.
The crazy people are identifiable by the strange patterns in their eyes, but other than that, they're hard to distinguish from anyone else. Gary exploits this to great effect when he infiltrates the group, managing to kill the remaining housemates except for Mallory and Tom. Until he picks his moment to attack the group, Gary seems completely normal. In fact, all the crazy people seem completely normal until they try to kill you.
Okay, I know you're scared. Well, listen, there's no need. I'm not here to hurt you. I can pull you to shore.
12 seconds later.
Take your goddamn blindfold off!
Boy, that escalated quickly.
Speaking of killing you, while the crazy people seem very motivated to make people see the creatures, that doesn't stop them from just killing people outright. First of all, they are aware that making people see the creatures will kill them, because they state multiple times that the creatures are here to cleanse the world.
It shall cleanse the world.
It shall cleanse the world!
Secondly, there are instances where they attack people intending to kill them without taking off their blindfolds.
Sorry that you didn't get to see.
They are armed, organized, and actively looking for anyone who hasn't seen the creatures. But determining how much of a threat these crazy people are is entirely dependent on how many of them are in the area. The film gives just 2 qualifying statements for who can see the creatures without committing suicide.
He works at the supermarket with me. He works in the seafood department. He's been to prison and he's a bit crazy, but
everything was fine until they broke in.
Creatures don't break into people's homes.
No, not the creatures. These psychos from Northwood. It's a mental institution for the criminally insane.
From these 2 statements, we can conclude that only the criminally insane are susceptible to the creatures. According to the California Department of State Hospital's 2018 annual report, there are approximately 7,000 patients within the forensic hospital system at any given moment. Most of these are centralized in the LA area, but 18.1% of that 7,000 are committed in Sacramento, San Francisco, Alameda, and Santa Clara counties, making for a total of 1,267 individuals nearby the proposed location of Pike's Quarry, as well as the Janet Tucker School for the Blind. There's no guarantee that they'll stay in this area, but there's also no guarantee that the other 5,700 of them won't head north. Over 5 years pass from the initial incident to when Mallory and the children arrive at the school, meaning that these 7,000 could travel quite a distance in that time frame as they're able to drive cars. And I want to stress this one more time. They can see where they're going, they're armed, they're organized, and they're actively searching for anyone who hasn't looked yet. They also have unlimited resources available to them. There's nothing stopping them from strolling up to an active military installation such as Camp Parks or ISC Alameda, both located in the San Francisco area, and taking several tanks out for a joyride. This is why the scenario in Bird Box is impossible to beat. The thousands of crazy people hunting for the remaining survivors have firepower, transportation, and time on their hands, not to mention the gift of sight. But to play devil's advocate with myself, let's run through all the possible solutions for Bird Box to see specifically why each one doesn't work, including the School for the Blind. This is a hard no. Melanie shot the creatures at point blank range and it had no effect whatsoever. If there is a way to kill them, we have no idea what that is. And even if you could kill them with conventional weapons, you'll have a finite supply of bullets before you run out and have to scavenge for more, which puts you at great risk of running into the crazy people. I guess you could wave a machete at them or something. I mean, it's worth a shot, but previous experience indicates that it probably won't work. The news mentions that the creatures have reached Alaska, and mere hours later they're already in California. Even if she immediately got in her car and tried to escape, the gist of the film is that the entire world is quickly overrun. And at this point in the film, Melanie isn't even sure what she's running from. If she attempted to escape by driving, she most likely would have seen one of the creatures along the way and would have perished. If Mallory had perfect information and knew what she was up against, and when the creatures were due to arrive, once she hears the news report, she should jump in her car and drive east into the Sierra Nevada mountain range. From the proposed location of Pike's Quarry, she could make it to the Ice House campground in just under 2 hours. That would get her there before the creatures show up, and it would keep her safe from the crazy people, as they're unlikely to find her anytime soon in such a huge and remote area. Without the threat of the crazy people, the creatures themselves are more annoying than they are threatening. But it would also mean she would have no food or other resources to survive on, and no way to easily collect them once she's in the forest and wearing a blindfold. This is a hypothetical best case scenario, and her chances of survival are still incredibly tiny. The fact is, she does not start with perfect information and would have no idea that driving east is the best thing to do. Given the constraints of the situation, escape is impossible. In my opinion, this is actually the best possible solution, and it's one that's briefly described in the book as well. If you're blind, theoretically the creatures should just leave you alone. There is a small possibility that the crazy people won't bother you either, since they seem determined to make people see the creatures. So maybe they'll leave you alone if you can't see them anyways. However, they do talk about cleansing the world, and we've seen them kill people without getting them to see. So I would say that blinding yourself is very, very risky. If I were in this situation, I would say, why don't you give that a shot and you let me know how that works out for you. I'll be over here not blinding myself. Last but not least, we get to the film solution, the school. Apparently it's a remote building housing dozens of people. They're armed, they have some kind of food supply, they have a warning system due to the birds, and they have a secure facility. But as we already discussed, the main problem isn't the creatures themselves, it's the crazy people. The facility may be secure, but it still has a road leading to it, and the proposed location of the school is extremely close to Highway 99, just north of San Francisco. There are thousands of crazy people wandering the area actively looking for people. The question isn't if they find the school, it's when. And once they find the school, they have unlimited time and resources to figure out how to breach the building by force. There are 2 military bases in San Francisco housing all kinds of weapons and explosive devices. They could even just find a semi-truck and ram a hole into the building. In fact, they don't even need to take the school by force. We've already seen that they're capable of infiltrating groups of people. Yes, the school is checking to make sure that they don't have strange textures in their eyes, but nothing is stopping them from wearing contact lenses. They could just pull a Robert Downey Jr., who was a dude playing a dude disguised as another dude. I think it would be reasonable to say that the school could survive for years, even decades after Melanie and the children arrive. But it's only a matter of time before the crazy people find them, and then all hope is lost. But if you disagree, if you think that you have the magic answer to beat Bird Box, please let us all know about it in the comments. It is your civic duty to protect your fellow humans from fictional apocalypse scenarios. A big thank you to all my patrons, and if you want to be as cool as them, head on over to patreon.com/filmherald. Thanks for watching, and until next time, this has been the Film Herald.